The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing.
Hey everyone, this is Tete DePunk, one of the co-hosts of the Nuts and Bolts in Writing. Today I will be interviewing poet and author Leslie Cairns, who submitted her poetry with the poem Family Trees to issue 2 of our literary zine, The Unconventional Courier. She also submitted her short story, Lunar, Twig, to issue 3 of The Unconventional Courier. I provided links to both of her works in the description. Leslie Cairns, she/her. Leslie Cairns holds an MA in English Rhetoric. She lives in Denver, Colorado. She is a Pushcart nomination for the 2022 short story category for Lunar, Twig. She was an honorable mention in Flash 405's Call and Exposition Review 2022. She also won a Valentine's Day competition with Short Story Today 2023. Her poetry chapbook about eating disorders and therapy, titled Food is the Fodder, is available for purchase and to read through Bottlecap Press. You can follow Leslie on Starbucks Girly. And now, on to our show. Hello, Leslie. Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Writing. We're thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We were absolutely honored to have you featured in not only one, but 2 of our issues. And we've definitely, enjoyed the prolific, work that you've shared with us and our audience. And today we're going to be talking about a challenge that a lot of creators face, and that's doubt. Doubt is a challenge all people, but of course, writers and poets face. In the creator's journey, we encountered these dark periods where inspiration abandons us, but sometimes we have to face those grim times where we doubt our own talent and the validation of our own work.
And yeah, absolutely.
And today we'll be discussing that, and we'll be discussing this challenge, how you overcame that. And it's just an honor to have an electrifying writer and poet like yourself. So I wanted to say, the focal struggle, like, for example, of the narrator in Lunar, and Twig was truly hard-hitting, poignant, and striking. This was definitely one of the strongest stories we've encountered in our publication. What inspired you to write Lunar, and Twig?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, I should say that this is a piece I almost didn't write. So that we can talk about that in a second. But I personally was virtually homeless in undergrad. So it was partially that. But I lived place to place. So I didn't, I wasn't the exact narrator. And I also was just really inspired by the idea of it's broken into sections of, DBT therapy. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of have each section be like the coping skills in DBT, but how would you apply that to like actually not having a home at the moment?
That's so hard hitting. I myself had some similar experiences due to the volatile nature of my own complex family relationships. So when I read the story, it definitely hit a very tender and tender chord within me. And so you mentioned that you almost didn't write this story. What was preventing you? Was it doubt, or was it other factors?
It was doubt. I really had this moment, I read a lot of poetry, and the writing community on Twitter is great, like no knocking that, but sometimes you can do that game of like reading things and being like, is mine too bizarre? I felt like this piece was going to be too out there, or too like that she's bonding with an owl but not connecting in the real life. I just was like, is it too out there for people to like to resonate with? And also, could I as a writer like pull it off, if that makes sense? Because I had the idea for the DBT part. I really like psychology and science. I was like, can I pull off actually telling the story in sections and having it make sense when it's about like an owl, like can I actually put the parts together? This one had more parts, I think, than some other things I've written.
That's definitely true. I mean, sometimes there is that doubt of whether you can, stitch it all together and unify it, as a cohesive piece, but you executed that perfectly. I know I myself and many in our audience, if not all of our audience, really appreciated, the smooth transition in that story, as well as the significance of the owl and what was, being placed in that bond between the
Mhm.
main character and the owl. And it was, like I said, it was very hard hitting, very poignant. And, I think a lot of people have gone through those very dark times, maybe in different contexts, but there have been times where we've connected with, another living being or, creature. It's just part of our, it's basically part of being human, in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going to say, in a different vein, what inspired you, which is, entirely different piece, a menagerie of animals? What was the inspiration behind that?
Um, I don't know if it's okay to that one is more personal.
More personal. I
Yeah.
understand. I understand.
Yeah. No, not that I can't answer, but yeah, did spend a time in a hospital um on Christmas. So I really like thought that that would be something interesting to write. I've thought that for a long time, but I wanted like space from it. And then again, I just kind of still really like I think when I think about therapy and psychology and mental health, which I'm really interested in all of those things, I it's almost like for me writing in relation to animals or nature because it makes more like it kind of connects to what makes sense when nothing else does is like you can go outside and be in nature, and I feel like it makes more sense than all the chaos that's going on in like the human side of your life. So that's kind of how I tied in that fabric to it, was sort of just I thought that they go well together to contrast like the heaviness of the actual like where the character was.
That makes a lot of sense, and I understand that. I myself, I'm in a rural area, and I've often found the logic of animals often surpasses the logic of humans just because of the simplicity. And as humans, we tend to overcomplicate every aspect of our life, leading to sort of a cacophony of living, so to speak. And
Mhm.
and that was a striking feature I saw in both, Owl, Lunar, Twig, as well as a menagerie of animals. And I think you mentioned too for this work, also you almost did not write that as well. So was that doubt? Was it similar to what you had with Owl, Lunar, and Twig, or was it a different kind of doubt?
Yeah, it was the same. It's just that feeling in your stomach when I hit submit of like I might have sent the most vulnerable to me, but also maybe vulnerable to me would be that it doesn't make sense if that it wasn't objective in my head. Like, is what I'm sending making sense, or is it just something that really matters to me? And I think that doubt is hard when you're submitting because it's hard to be objective. Like, is this a good piece or is this, like just something, you know, that you still need to work through? And I just remember submitting both of those and being like, should I have done that?
I think it's wonderful you took that risk. I think many writers often have that doubt where, they don't know if their work is meant specifically for them as a growing part of a journey,
Mhm.
or if other people can connect or understand that. And, many times I've realized when people have doubt that and they put it out there, they realize there are other people going through similar, if not the same, uh, journey as well. And I think it's necessary to have those works out there so people can say, hey, I'm not alone. There's another person who's thinking about the same things I'm struggling with and putting it into words. Because once people can see something articulated, there comes the formation of a solution, or at least it sheds a light, if you will, on the path to getting out of that dark tunnel, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part of doubt that I don't, some writers I know from what I've read on Twitter, we all write so differently. But Menagerie of Animals, besides editing it, came out in one sitting. So I think there's doubt there too of like, when it comes out like that, it's kind of scary, to be honest. It might sound like a good thing, but I feel kind of have some doubt of like, okay, this is different than, you have an idea and you structure it and lay it out. This was more just, it kind of came out in a good writing sitting. And like, is that a good thing to submit? So I feel like it's that doubt too.
Yeah, there was more of an organic nature, sort of an organic what do I want to say, burst,
Mhm.
and that's how do I say, for writers that can be a rare instance, but it can be very rewarding. And you can often create some of the most solid works that really reach a wide and broad audience, like not even the audience as an audience, but just as another person communicating to another person about the fabric of the soul, if you will, as to paraphrase Dostoevsky.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm learning. And if people are listening, it's kind of like letting me realize I can tap into, my emotions when I sit down to write, and I can, um, because it really is like your mood at the time, and if it's snowing or not. And like when you feel like it's good for you, which is different for everyone. I think it's just trusting that and like being like, no, I should write now. Like this is, feels like it means a lot to me. And I'm starting to like learn that. I do write pretty consistently to keep to keep your practice up. I feel like
Right.
that's helped me, but at the same time, I think in that case, I could have easily just watched TV or something. And, you know, I'm glad I uh, felt like it was time to write that.
And that's something I myself have learned on this journey too, rather than, like you said, it's a time you could have easily watched TV or have done something else. You choose that precious window of time, to create, and it's something that helps you kind of progress in your own journey, and you've produced something that's there, and hopefully it'll be immortalized, whether it's print publication or online publication, and then other people can connect with that and understand it. So that's wonderful to kind of recognize that moment, that window of time in which you can, forge something. And I think that's something a lot of writers kind of struggle with. They don't, they kind of struggle with consistency, or they struggle with, overcoming that doubt, like, should I do this now? But like you said, it's different for everyone. And
Mhm.
it's very fortunate that you did it in that time window. And I was going to ask too, so when you had this doubt, or any different types of doubt, how do you overcome that? Is it just a matter of pushing yourself, or do you have a method to, overcoming that?
I do have sort of a pragmatic approach to it to some extent. So, uh, I mean, the part that what we just talked about, like kind of just sometimes when you feel the messiest is, for me, is it feels not ordered and not structured, but that's a good time for me to write when I'm feeling a lot of doubt. But a pragmatic thing that I've learned is that for me, I can tell myself, okay, you're going to write like a micro flash, so like 100 words, or I go and look for, a literary magazine like yours that has theme submissions. And so I do one of those two. So I either say like write, 100 words, and I use the weird word generator a lot just to look at random weird words. And usually there's one that's really pretty or interesting. So I do that, or I yeah, use a themed call and kind of just, I'm like, I can at least attempt to write to this theme. You know, it may not go anywhere. And usually one of those two just feels manageable. And then I often write, you know, more than that, or I get kind of out of my own head. And then I'm like, oh, I have this idea, this idea. And that's what's kept me going, kind of like little, like, you know, beads on a necklace. It's like you're gonna have, I think, like those writer block, but if you keep at least writing the 100 words, I think you're gonna like keep stringing along and then have that, you know, writing burst again is what I'm learning.
That's a very interesting approach. I haven't seen a lot of people describe it like that. Actually, you're probably the first person I've heard to describe it like that. Pardon that noise outside. I'm in
Oh, it's okay.
Pennsylvania and we have a fierce windstorm coming in from the north.
Oh, geez.
Yes, yes, crazy weather down in the Keystone, but um so I just had to shut my window. I also thought this was interesting too, how something could start from 100 words, but then that kind of builds and builds. And,
Mhm.
I think a lot of creators have also experienced that. And it's a wonderful thing because you think, oh, I'll just make this one small thing. And then it blossoms into a much bigger work and it expands. Um, what was there any particular work that you saw expand like that was the most rewarding for you at this point in your writer's journey?
Um, the chapbook that I just did was a lot of that because I had a lot of doubt. But also I would say one that, um, well, I guess I'll just all the Renesmee Literary does all those Twilight tweet length calls, and all of those have been um ones that I've used in times of like I'm not sure what to write. But I would say the most rewarding is I do have one called She Was Steady, and it was just like an idea I had. It's kind of about identity, and I identify as queer, so but I'm still wrapping my own head around it. So it felt really
Right.
like I wanted to try it, writing about it, but I didn't know how to, you know, like put the pieces together. And that one was really done in like little bursts and a lot of weird word generator, looking up random words and kind of going back. So I would say that one's rewarding because it did get published, and um, it meant a lot to me when it was done. And it was a lot different than when I wrote Menagerie of Animals. It was definitely very choppy.
And that in itself, it's often those works that, one could say are compartmentalized, or as you described it, choppy. They themselves kind of create a very unique collection. It's a bit of it's like a song cycle, so to speak, and it all ties together in the end.
Hmm. And I wonder
Yeah.
if readers can tell, you know, like, I don't know if when I read my favorite poets, it'd be interesting. Like, is this one they wrote piecemeal, or was this one they wrote, you know, it was like just an idea they've always wanted to write about, and it came out really easily, you know?
I know what you mean. I myself am currently going through something like that. And, when you decide to act on it, it can really take shape, despite the doubts of whether it can take shape or not. A lot of times it's just taking that risk. And I think a lot of times the best works can be created from spontaneity. I guess, as you've described it, would you say that spontaneity has, played a factor in how birth the creation of these pieces?
Yeah, it's that classic, like you're in the shower or whatever. And I would say um, I think what's you have a lot of doubt about is what we discussed before. Like, is this just, you know, something that's coming to me and I still need to work on it, like in my own head, or should I write now? I think that doubt is there sometimes, or will people connect to it? But not to keep mentioning the chapbook, but I actually had that idea, like thought of the title and then thought of subtitles like the same night. And then it was just a matter of writing them and editing them. And that one just came really quickly. And that makes me think that I need to trust topics like that come, you know, quickly, and also to, um, I guess, kind of go with what, you know, like go, it's not intuition, but like trust your creativity, you know, like this idea is coming to me and it's coming easy, and I shouldn't doubt that people won't resonate or like it, or like don't worry about that right now, like just write it, you know. So
Right, exactly. Just write it. You know, that's something, I mean, it should be like a slogan, or like
yeah.
like a slogan on a shirt, or a sticker on the wall, you know, just write. That's a constant reminder we need as writers. And um I thought maybe this would be a good time to discuss your most recent work, your chapbook. I
Mhm,
believe that you had published with Bottlecap Press.
mhm.
Um was this was this particular, was this an idea that just formed spontaneously, or was this something you had been wanting to write for a long time, and you know, you finally you know, got down to do it?
It is that what I was like, very spontaneous. I thought of the food as the fodder. Yeah, like, you know, it's a play on father a little bit.
Right, right.
I thought that that's saying was really, it's kind of, I think it's kind of pretty too. I don't know why.
I think
Um,
it is.
yeah,
Great,
and
great
then
guess.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's the F and the F, and
Yeah, it's sort of an there's a bit of an alliteration theme
yeah,
going there. But you know,
yeah,
also true, it ties in with that theme that food is indeed the fodder of that particular subject and challenge.
yeah. And that one, I wrote it in about, I would say 2 to 3 months. I mean, I know it's a chapbook, but it came pretty easily. So I would say it was pretty spontaneous. But the one piece that's in there, um, sweater weather aesthetic, which I don't, I kind of fiddled with that title a lot, but that one I have thought about that poem for a while in my head. So that one was one that I've wanted to write for a long time. Um, yeah, just the idea. I know that there's a lot of college students, or maybe you're not in college, that, you know, you're supposed to just launch into the next chapter. And I know there's a lot of college students that actually have like a lot of financial and insecurity and other insecurities in that last few months. And I've wanted to write about that idea for a while.
And that's something, you know, that's something I'm glad that you've written about. That's something that I don't think many writers are tackling on, you know, and it's something that, you know, people who experience this or understand it, you know, they should write about it and voice that. And you know, your work so far, from everything I've seen, has just been very, you know, hard hitting yet heartfelt, you know, articulate, and there's a sense of beauty too, in that as well. And I guess that leads to a question that kind of is still on topic. How would you compare your works that you've thought about for a long time, that have been stewing in your mind, as opposed to the works that are, you know, just conceived spontaneously? Do you think that there's a difference in those, or do you feel like they come from the same place?
I do think there's a difference. It's, um, I think the ones that are simmering in my head kind of, they become like your favorite poems, you know, internally if they get out in the world, because you're like, oh, I've obsessed about this for so long, and I'm glad someone also, you know, wants to obsess about this. But on the other hand, I think uh, I've been writing now maybe for a year almost every day. I take some days off. So
Right.
I find the spontaneous ones in my mind are like really interesting, because I'm like, I think I'm more skilled now than a year ago in terms of just writing a lot. You know, you learn so much and you read a lot. So the ideas that are coming spontaneously sometimes feel more polished, or they just feel like they're coming from my, you know, my place that I've like worked toward. Kind of like when you play piano for a year straight, you know, you're going to gain some technical skills.
Technical skill.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and you know, you learn to find your own style, which creates that unique value, you know,
Mhm.
like in art, you know, I myself, I do a bit of art. I'm more of an amateur, but I've learned more about compositional value, and when you add that, it gives kind of a weight and dimension with your work. And it sounds like that's similar to what you've been experiencing with the consistent practicing, that you've found this weight and dimension in your work. And I mean, and one can definitely see that in much of your work. I mean, if not all of your work. I haven't had the chance to explore the full catalog of your work, but from what I have seen, there is a lot of weight and dimension in it that is very, very unique. And I guess this sort of revolving back to what we were talking about, doubt. um how would you advise others to overcome doubt in their creative or personal journey? Like, was there something that prompted you, or was it a matter of just kind of fumbling in the night, so to speak?
Um, I think I have a I have like two totally different answers. I think one is kind of like, I'm sure you might agree, like a plea to anyone who also wants to talk like openly and honestly about mental health or anything related, like owl, lunar, twig, homelessness, or whatever. I noticed like a gap in what was out there. And not that I'm, like the best at it, but I'm like, I think I could write some things that aren't said out loud very much. And that kind of was motivation beyond the doubt. So I don't know, even if someone has like a topic different than mental health, but they see a gap, I just would encourage anyone to be like, no, not enough people are talking about this. I kind of want to join it because I'm gonna like help. That kind of overcame my doubt. I also, on a totally different realm, I left teaching a year ago. I know that people have to leave teaching, but I started doing more admin roles and jobs like that. And it was easier to build in time to write. But now I think even if I switch back to a different sector, I still could make time for myself. So I think it's really just like almost like going to the gym or hanging out with friends, or, things that are good for you. Just
Right.
build in that half hour or 20 minutes. It can be so hard, but I just think consistent writing for yourself makes you feel good. And um, it builds your skill too, like what we were saying.
That's very true. So this is very encouraging to a lot of people. A lot of people think that either a big catalyst happens, or what have you. But with you, with you, have you've described it, a good way to do that is, like you said, work that in, just like something that is good for you, and it becomes easier to step out of that doubt.
Hmm. And now it
Yeah.
becomes like like I look forward to the writing time, even if it's not, a great writing day or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some days are better than others. Some, like, for example, I'm a night owl, much to the detriment
Yeah.
of a lot of things, because we live in a daytime society. But I'm a night owl, and a lot of times, I'll set aside an hour or two for writing. Sometimes I can put out so many words, and I'm like, wow, I've made progress in this. And then some nights will be like, I really struggled with that, two or three paragraphs, and I was like, and then you get frustrated, and then you try to look for a playlist.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I'm working on a short story, which I think is my hardest medium, to be
Right.
honest. And
Yeah.
I am just like, there was a day where the topic was too close to like my day-to-day life. And so I told myself, like, just write like a paragraph or two in that document and then go do something on a different topic. It's
Well,
okay.
so that's so true. I mean, sometimes you can't always focus particularly on one work. You have to kind of revolve around your different works. I mean, I've done that too. I have a work that, as much as I love it, it's very exhausting. It's too
Hmm.
big in scale, and it's like it's like a rambunctious being I have to take a break from.
Yep.
uh, you know
Yep.
yeah, and it's just for one's health and everything.
Hmm.
what would you say, which work do you feel like the most was out of your range, like the one that just felt most out of your range, like out of experience or whatever have you?
Um, it's a really good question. I almost want to say Owl Lunar Twig, but I guess I would go with I did write another story. So both of them. There's a story called The Comeback that I actually really like now. But uh it was hard because it's a short story and it the call was about animals. So I just really wanted it to be like short stories to me just seem like you have you have to set up everything so fast. So um that felt really hard because I and it was also about like toxic childhood friendships and how they still impact you today. And I had an idea in my head that I had to just give up like halfway through because that's just not how it was. I just couldn't figure out how to like line up the whole. I was going to like flash forward to the future. I'm like, I just can't figure out how to write that well. Um, so I think what was out of range for me was the topic had to, be small in scope and also just I didn't want to come across as um, I don't know, just a nostalgic piece. I wanted it to be more than that, like about identity. And so I struggled. Like I didn't struggle with the plot, but I struggled with like how to make the plot do all of that I just said.
Right. And that sometimes it's when we're out of that, or out of that, out of the similarity or familiarity, we can explore things we did not even think or know about, even about ourselves.
Yeah, and it was about condors, which I had to, research a lot, but I really wanted it to be about the condor because, yeah. So it ended up being a piece I really like, but it's like, I don't know if anyone's gonna like this.
I think there will be people. I mean, I know I would be very interested in reading that. Condors have a significant role, like especially in Latin American cultures, where on my mother's side I hail from. So,
Yeah.
definitely want to read that. And I did have one last question for you. So, as with any journey, as with any life on Earth, there's always dawn, after the night. For you, in your experience, what is the best encouragement you've encountered in your creative journey?
Best encouragement. Um, I'll just end with an anecdote, but I think it can tie to I think it can tie to like words of wisdom. I had a writing tutor for a while, who I met happenstance, but who works in publishing and she did tutoring. And she was just very like didn't give compliments easily. And that's just her, her style and her method. And when she finally would, it was like it meant so much to me. And I think it's not, like praise for praise sakes, like reading your awards or reading compliments or things like that. But I feel like it's when someone um who's either like, like her who doesn't give compliments easily, or there's someone who reaches out to you and they're just like, this poem, like needed like it helped me through something. I just think it feels like so humbling. It feels like you took something hard in your life or vulnerable to you and like gave it to someone and twisted it in like the nicest way, and like helped them. It's just such a validating feeling. I've had a couple people say like, thank you for, this poem like really resonated with me, or I really need to hear a line like that. And it's not like a accolade, like in terms of you're the best or something, but it just means so much. It feels like because all those poems, a lot of them, I'm like, I wrote them in such a messy place and my day to day can be really hard, but I still help someone. Like that just feels really awesome.
And that is so rewarding, and and it's wonderful when we can receive praise that's kind of hard won,
Mm-hmm.
especially coming from a place where a person or an entity or an audience doesn't easily, say or express, what their opinion is or whatever have you. So that means that your work had a greater impact if it prompted them to say that. And that in itself says a lot, not only about your work, but the impact of one's work. And you're right, that can be the greatest encouragement, especially for a creator, be that a writer or who's ever working in whatever medium.
Yeah, and especially when you start off, you might only hear that, from one
Yeah.
person, but I just hold on to them, and it means, like, you think of them sometimes when you feel stuck.
Right. And I was going to say, last but not least, since unfortunately our time is coming to an end in a few moments or minutes, I should say, for your recent work, your chapbook, Food is the Fodder,
Mhm.
um, would you like to, do you have anything to say on it, or, how or why you created it, or what you would like people to take away from it when they encounter your work?
Yeah, I'll be brief, but it's from Bottlecap Press. It's my first chapbook ever, so I want to hear, like, good, bad, ugly. But I would say that, I mean, be wary. It's about trauma, eating disorders, homelessness. Like, it kind of skips around. So just, if you're not ready for that, totally understand. But my goal with that was, again, when we were talking about the gap, I just think eating disorders and other mental health issues are often written about, like, you're either ones that you're in the trenches and that's it, or that typical, like, they're sick and they get better. They're sick, they get better. And I think it's way more like infinity loop than that. So that was my hope, was to show that, like, I might struggle with those issues a little bit my whole life. Um, and that's okay. And kind of talk about, like, the different moments of recovery that aren't linear, or and then I wanted, even though it's heavy in material, I did want moments of showing what helped, and they might be really random things, not traditional, um, breakthrough aha moments, but little tiny moments that really helped, or when the narrator, like, has a tiny semblance of liking food or hopeful. I wanted to talk about that food element just a little bit more, because I think it's, if you're ready to read about food, some people, it might be too close to home at the time, but if you can, I think that's just such a overlooked part when you talk about eating disorders. So I tried to add that in too.
And you're absolutely right. That is an aspect that is often overlooked, or, we never get a different perspective in how people experience it or how they receive it or how they process it. So, food for the fodder is definitely, not only is it, striking, but it's something that definitely needed to be told. And I know, I myself and other people, who have encountered it and will continue to explore it more in depth when we revisit it again, will definitely find new truths, coming out of this, narration that you've created.
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah, any feedback, I would love to um hear it, or yeah, it's just my first one. So
Well, that is, well, I really want to thank you for coming on here today. I
of
wish we
course.
could talk more. There's a
Yeah.
lot of fertile ground to touch upon, but we hope that we can, hear from you again. Always feel free to reach out to us. And I do want to thank you again for agreeing to be on the podcast. Thank you for reaching out to our zine, and we wish you all the best. And thank you so much for coming on to the Nuts and Bolts, Leslie. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Oh, you too. You're very, very welcome. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.